If you've watched any of my videos that pertain to anime games, you will know that I have an intense passion for One Piece. I've been reading the series weekly for nearly a decade now and plan to continue doing so until I finally know what Gold Roger's legendary treasure actually is. It's a very special series to me in ways that I would only have time to explain in a totally separate video. The point I'm trying to get across is that if you are expecting any semblance of an unbiased review, not that that's a thing anyway, this definitely isn't one. My history with the One Piece series colors my perception and wants out of the One Piece games that I play, and I have no way to divorce my love of the series when tackling a review like this. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about One Piece Burning Blood. One Piece Burning Blood is a 3D anime fighter developed by Spike Chunsoft, released in 2016. 2 years have passed since this game's release, and the major downside to that is that, yeah, the online community is relatively dead, at least on PC. You can still get some multiplayer games in if you find a buddy on the Steam forums, but barring that, you're going to be playing solo, like I did most of the time. Naturally, your solo journey will bring you to the main campaign of this game, which focuses on the Paramount War arc in the One Piece canon, more commonly known as Marineford. It is a combat-focused storyline that takes place almost 500 episodes into the series. The combat-heavy Marineford arc seems like it would be a good fit for a fighting game, but starting smack dab in the middle of the One Piece storyline will definitely alienate anyone who is not already familiar with everything going on. A tournament fighter arc, this is not. Despite the heavy emphasis on combat, it is still very much heavily buried within the One Piece lore. Lacking the context of the rest of the comic behind you will leave you dreadfully lost. Clearly, this game wasn't made for non-fans. So let's say you are a huge fan of the series. How is the campaign within that context? It's pretty poor. The more limited scope of a single arc doesn't seem to give the game any greater focus than you might think. You jump between 4 different characters playing through the same fights, on the same 2 maps, over and over and over again, going back and forth in time as you switch between all of them. The way the story of this campaign is told is also a mixed bag. The cutscenes are really well done, with the heavily inked style of the manga definitely making its way into the graphical style of this game. But the majority of the story is told through anime screenshots being narrated to us. Look, the campaign isn't worth your time, fan of the series or not. It's visually boring by limiting itself to a single location in the expansive One Piece universe. You're forced to play as the same 4 characters. It's not presented elegantly at all. It's just a last-minute thrown together hodgepodge, just to be able to claim that the game has a story mode. So, given that online mode is essentially dead, and the story mode is horrible, your time will be spent in the free play mode, which is the gameplay in its purest form. The fighting takes place on a 3D plane that you can walk around freely, as well as strafe around your opponents with quick dashes to the side, not unlike Tekken. Yes, the gameplay of Burning Blood is interesting, and there's certainly a lot to talk about. I actually think it does a great number of things right, so I want to start there. For starters, I really love how the game integrates so many of One Piece's combat elements into the combat itself, in more ways than just flavor. Let me explain what I mean. In the One Piece universe, there are some characters who have the ability to make themselves immaterial and cause attacks to phase right through them. There are also characters who have the ability to bypass this immunity, using an ability called Haki, and hit their foe despite them being immaterial. This dynamic is brought into Burning Blood. Immaterial characters can hold a button to make themselves immune to an attack for a limited time, but be careful, because should a character who knows Haki strike them during this time, they'll take some extreme damage and have the ability negated. It's an interesting power struggle that you have to be cognizant of at all times during play, and characters that have both immaterial bodies and the ability to use Haki are insanely powerful and should be feared. That leads me to another really interesting thing that this game does, and that's the balance. In an attempt to make the characters more true to the source material, it doesn't try to make the roster perfectly balanced. The crew's cowardly sniper Usopp is nowhere near as strong as Whitebeard, the strongest pirate in the world, and Burning Blood wears that on its sleeve. Characters are assigned point values, so the weaker characters are worth less points than the strong ones. You have 9,000 points to spend between the 3 characters you bring into a fight at any given time, and any passive or active support abilities that you attach to them. You could opt to pick 3 insanely powerful 3,000 point characters, but then you lose the ability to use any supports. Alternatively, you can pick some mid-range and weak characters, then load them up on the support abilities. The characters also really feel like themselves in battle, with some quirks that distinguish themselves amongst the rest of the roster. Blackbeard's ability to nullify the powers of other characters can be activated with certain attacks. Bartolomeo can drop barriers that can be utilized by his team. And perhaps my favorite of all is Sanji's complete inability to attack female characters. Those points probably mean nothing to you if you've never read the comic or seen the show, but that's exactly my point. There is a lot of fan service here. The combat is very simple. There are no complicated fighting game inputs that you need to learn. Everything is easily accessible, and the skill comes from knowing when to use your abilities, and that's how I prefer it. This is exemplified even more by the relatively slow pace of the game for an anime fighter. There is a deliberateness to each punch and movement that gives the game an amazing sense of readability, and more so than any other fighting games I've played, I actually felt like I reached a level of determinism, where each attack I had was thought out, and not just me hitting buttons. After my first few hours, I was really starting to have a decent time with Burning Blood, but the poor campaign isn't the only major problem that this game has. The slow readability of the combat comes at the cost of game feel. Running around and punching just doesn't feel weighty, impactful, or fluid. It's a combination of a few things. Wet, moppy sound effects, sometimes floaty animations, and so on. It's especially obvious in the characters' walk cycles. They all feel like they're walking through molasses in terms of speed and visual. When fighting as a female character, their clothes will become more and more ripped throughout the fight, which doesn't happen to the male characters. Whenever I was so obviously reminded of this fact while playing, it made me feel like the game was waifu bait anime garbage in a way that the source material most definitely is not. And on top of it all, the menus are the definition of lazy. Stills of the characters standing around an inn. I mean, look at this. One Piece deserves so much more than this. Burning Blood is almost a thumbs up, and with a few changes I think it could have been. I actually really like a lot of the ideas that Burning Blood had, but there's just no getting around the fact that the campaign is absolute garbage, and the game feel just isn't there. It feels halfway in between a spectacle-focused anime fighter and a more traditional fighting game, and I think I would have preferred it lean way more into the spectacle than any semblance of competition. It's definitely not the One Piece fighting game that I want, but I think the refinement that a sequel might bring could absolutely salvage what worked here and turn it into something special. But as it is now, Burning Blood is a tough sell even for the most hardcore of fans.